Hello. Um, I'm Asher Bennett. I'm the founder and CEO of Tevva Hydrogen Electric Trucks. Amazing event here, and thank you all for the invitation to come and present about what I'm very passionate about, and that is decarbonizing large commercial vehicles. We are very much a mission-based company. We're proud that we are a mission-based company that attracts strong team members, and we believe in that direction. And when there's a hiccup or problem, is what's best for the mission, not what's best for the company, always helps make a decision. On a personal basis, my first career, I was a submarine officer. And I only mentioned that for one reason. That was my first electric vehicle. So the whole bottom of the submarine was a big bank of batteries connected to a very large electric motor. Obviously, what we charged back at the base was not enough to go off weeks at a time, so we had a second energy source. Back in the day, we called it a diesel generator. Simple, but I brought a lot of that concept to the world of trucks. We've had a fleet of trucks now with UPS on the road for 3.5 years, production trucks. Before that, a couple of years of prototypes. They've been literally on the road 3.5 years, one fleet in Portsmouth, one in near Tamworth, and we basically cover all of Portsmouth. The people of Portsmouth have had cleaner air for the last few years. Part of that was challenging of handing over the last truck in February 2020 of the series. Interesting time in the world, but they're working very nicely. If this was live and connected to the internet, I would pull up the telematics right now. We could see where they're doing, where they're delivering, etc. You can, or show to you on my phone later if you come up to me. And lastly, our pride and joy, our third generation truck, our dual energy hydrogen electric truck. And you just mentioned how much trucks emit. So you took one of the points I like to make. But this point is very unintuitive. And it is that trucks emit more carbon than the whole aviation and maritime sectors together. Not intuitive. And let's also see where we are right now. So right now, proudly, in the UK, 1/3 of all new passenger cars are all electric. You should be really proud. I think across Europe it's 25%. In the US it's double digit, but the low double digits. That's amazing. That means the battery car has become completely mainstream. Let's understand why. The average passenger car worldwide drives 1 to 2 hours a day. Obviously, you don't buy a car just for average, but all the newest EVs have over 200, many over 300 miles of range. You have 22 hours opportunity to charge every day. It's fit for purpose of what a passenger car is meant to do. That's why we have 1/3 of all new cars. Electric trucks worldwide, very, very few. Very, very few electric trucks. And to understand why, is because they're going to go out for 8, 9, 10 hours of work. That's what trucks are meant to do. No fleet manager is going to send out a truck in the morning if it's not guaranteed to complete its day. Whatever that day is, by the way, reach its final destination, or in the medium weight classes, often back to base. Also, no fleet manager is going to depend on the fact that you send a truck out late afternoon, the driver sees a low state of charge, to ask the driver to go off their route, search for a charger, hope it's not blocked by some random diesel car, happens all the time, sit around for half an hour on a top-up charge, and then continue the route and go back a few miles. Not going to happen in the world of trucks. Trucks are only going to be sent on routes that there are no risks of completing what they can. And then comes the next issue with energy. There is no such thing as an exact specific range for an exact specific amount of energy, be it a fully charged battery, or the way I like to give examples. I know you guys are in this world, but I'll still use the simpler example. Take a standard, fully fueled petrol sedan, put 5 of me inside, put 150 kilograms of stuff in the back, and then climb mountains, air conditioner on, and drive fast and erratically. You'll easily get half the range in that car. If any one of you is sitting in that same fully fueled petrol sedan, driving on a flat motorway, on a very efficient 56 miles per hour. That's mostly physics. When you move to trucks, that variance is much larger because the mass influence on a truck from low weight to full weight is a lot more than a lot of me in a car. You get different drivers every day. That's 30% difference in range right there. So you might have your standard driver drives really well, and then you have an agency temp drives very badly, or the other way around. I'm not saying, but you literally do not know how good or bad. You can get up to 30% different in range. This is before what the route is. So is that range climbing mountains, or is that range nice and flat city center? And of course, trucks lead a lot of auxiliary energy, refrigeration, carbon compaction. That just goes to one thing: removing range. And of course, all the basic things that are always true in EVs: weather, traffic, etc. Let's understand our technology. At the bottom is our battery. We make our own battery packs. So we purchase cells, but from cells we build it into modules. Each module we put our local battery management system that manages things like the temperature, impedance, voltages, and very importantly manages the balancing of the cells in that module. Connect a lot of modules together into packs, add the cooling system, some safety systems, and all that connects together to the global battery management system, which is communicating with the rest of the vehicle. And so if we make our own battery, here's another solution to completely removing the risk of range and all that. Let's triple the battery on our trucks. Now just to understand, this battery notionally will cover 85, 95% of your energy needs. But getting back to base 29 out of 30 days a month is not acceptable, not even nearly acceptable. So let's double or triple the battery. That's one solution, just more battery than you'll ever need. The downside of that is batteries are very heavy, so it eats in significantly into payload, the whole point of having a truck, by the way. And number two, when you get to a battery of that size, of the many hundreds kilowatt hour size, the charger will easily cost more than the truck. Not a great solution. So our approach is dual energy. So to back up the battery, we put the hydrogen, a small hydrogen fuel cell system. Now, what are the advantages of hydrogen? So that cylinder of hydrogen weighs about 100 kilograms and has the same amount of effective energy, and I'm being very precise here. Effective energy is the energy that you get from the fuel cell itself after the losses, etc., which is similar to about 600 to 700 kilograms of battery, which is about the amount of battery that you see on this truck. So by putting one cylinder of hydrogen, we've doubled the amount of energy on this truck. 2, 3, we've now triple, quadrupled a lot of the energy on this truck. There is a lot of energy in this truck. There's almost very little you could throw at this truck on a given day that it can't complete, okay? The other advantage of hydrogen is it takes 10 minutes to refuel/charge. If hydrogen is so good, then why don't we go all hydrogen? Hydrogen now and for the next few years has downsides. Hydrogen, the fuel itself, is much more expensive than grid electricity. The fuel cells, this fuel cells harding here, are quite expensive. And we overcome, and it's hard to get. Okay. I drove a Toyota Mirai for 6 months. It is hard to get. We elegantly solve the downsides by using the hydrogen system as a backup energy source. So the way we look at it, you have the primary energy in the battery, which is great. We love lithium-ion battery. Charge it every night and it run all day. Do not ever be concerned about running out, because if you do run out, the hydrogen system will automatically kick in. And let's talk about the advantage of that. Taking a battery truck and putting it on short ranges is what happens in trucks if you don't have it, kills the advantage of electric trucks. Every mile you drive is so much cheaper than driving a diesel truck, but you have to drive a lot more of those cheap miles to justify the higher capex of an electric truck. Also, we want, as a mission-based company, to replace the dirty diesel trucks doing the longer range, not the ones doing the shorter range. And lastly, as a commercial company, I want my available market to be all the trucks out there, not about 30% of trucks that could probably get away with a battery-only solution. By the way, we make battery-only as well. We're very well with the limitations, and it's about a mix. It's the fleets, we tell you, by 30%, 20% battery only, and the rest hydrogen electric. And on the day, our software will manage which truck goes to where. Since this is a technology conference, we developed an electronic braking system. All I can say is it's a fly-by-wire system. In UPS, 25 to 35% of the daily energy comes from regenerative braking. On a fly-by-wire electronic braking system, we get more. And not only without compromising safety, with more safety. Okay, it's faster reaction times. It's also step one on our future autonomous strategy, but that's for a different discussion. Along with a company in Newcastle, we developed this AEM, we developed this motor. It's actually 2 motors on 1 shaft. Advantage of that is safety and redundancy. If one motor goes down, you can still drive on the other motor. It's not meant to drive all day. It's meant you have 10 miles to find a safe place to stop thinking. But we've tested from London to Dover and back on 1 motor. We've developed all the control systems, the major control systems on this truck. The hardware itself, not the microprocessors, those we buy. We always put 2 microprocessors. That's about safety and redundancy of automotive. We wrote the operating system that runs on the controls and the software that runs the operating system on the to control everything. And lastly, proudly, the dual energy is completely controlled by the cloud. The driver has no control over the hydrogen system. No on, no off, no power setting. The driver drives, focuses on that. The cloud-based system is making smart decisions when and how to use the hydrogen system, and I'll just give, by example, some advantages. We don't wait till the last moment and the energy is very low in the battery. We predict it earlier in the day, and that means we can turn the hydrogen fuel cell on earlier in the day at half power, run it, say, for 2 hours at half power, rather later in the day for an hour at full power. That it's a 22% efficiency boost to the hydrogen. Amazing. It lengthens the life of the hydrogen stack, fuel cell stack, and also we do it tactically. It lengthens the life of the battery. Simply put, if this battery we predict is going to climb this mountain for 20 miles nonstop, going to be hot, that's when we'll do it because it de-stresses the battery. And there's a lot more advantage, and we're optimizing for cost, carbon intensity of hydrogen versus electricity, what this truck is doing tomorrow, what this truck will be doing, other trucks in the fleet doing tomorrow, and are there opportunities to public hydrogen refueling, which we currently are not relying on, but if they're up, we're delivering to the depots. So where are we focused? We don't do small vans or pickup trucks. Why? Because in my world, a small van or pickup truck is actually the same technology as a battery sedan. And battery sedans work very well. In fact, I'll say, where batteries alone work, that's a great solution. I've been building lithium-ion batteries for 15 years. It's a great solution where it works. Hydrogen is really useful where it alone doesn't work. We're focusing on all the medium weight classes, so that's 7.5 ton to 19 ton. 2 minutes. And we will, a bit later, move into the semi-trailer, 40-ton, tractor-trailer, crisscrossing continents. We certainly can do that today technologically. The issue is the infrastructure and hence the economics don't make sense yet. And let's be clear. If we don't sell a truck, our sales pitch to our customers, here's a truck that has no range limits, and because of that, you're actually lower cost than running a diesel truck. That's the way to sell. Don't talk about the green. The green comes automatically. Best way to sell solar panels, better than grid. Okay, got it. A lot of players are trying all battery with its limitations. A few all hydrogen with its, in my opinion, even bigger limitations. We take the dual energy approach, and again, it's all controlled by the cloud. That's our assembly facility, 40 minutes from here in Tilbury, Essex. Proudly, it's a bit more advanced than what you see right now. It's a few months old picture. And our capacity here is 33,000 trucks a year on multiple chassis types and things. And thank you for your time. And I guess maximize my 15 minutes, so pleasure.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Another brilliant session. We've got a third session for you now. Everything today is all about innovation, and I think this next company really is a truly innovative company. Not only do they have innovative products, they also have innovative business models. So to tell us all about it, please welcome Hugo Spowers.
Yep, thank you very much indeed. Thank you, and Delighted to be here. Thanks very much for inviting me. I'm actually from a motorsport background. I spent 15 years designing and driving racing cars. And I got out for environmental reasons. I'd always been interested in the environment, but I used to reconcile this by, on the basis that motorsport's the quickest and cheapest way to improve the efficiency of combustion engines. And I still believe that's true. But I reached the conclusion we needed to get rid of combustion engines altogether. And so that didn't really stack up any longer. I set up Riversimple with this environmental agenda. And at front and center in the business. It's an extremely purpose-driven company. But for the avoidance of doubt, we are a sustainable car company, not a hydrogen car company. We are in such a pickle. We are so late in addressing the challenge that we really need every tool in the toolbox. And we really can't afford to be squabbling about a single solution. For example, we don't argue about solar PV or wind turbines, which one's going to win the renewable energy race. They're just different, and we need them both, but for different applications. And the same is absolutely true of battery vehicles and hydrogen vehicles. We are focused on fuel cell electric vehicles, principally because there's nothing that can be as sustainable as a fuel cell vehicle for the sort of range to which we've become accustomed. And they play a critical role in a future sustainable transport mix. But we're also focusing on these because there's a gap. It's the one area that really isn't being addressed effectively. Fuel cells are very, very different to petrol engines, and we need to make a different sort of car. Rather than try and shoehorn hydrogen and fuel cells into a platform that's evolved for over 100 years around petrol engines, and then try and persuade it to behave like a petrol engine, which it really doesn't do very well. The technology exists, but this approach really needs system-level innovation, which is where the real opportunities always lie in step changes. And it absolutely plays to the skills in motorsport, which is really all about systems innovation. As I say, we need both batteries and hydrogen, but there's a common misconception that we need hydrogen for HGVs because they're large. We absolutely do need hydrogen for HGVs. That's quite right. But the reasoning is entirely wrong. It's got nothing to do with size or weight at all. And I can give you two examples to illustrate this. The first is that you can easily make a battery electric HGV if you're happy to do 50 miles a day. But it's not what HGVs do. And it's the range and also the uptime, the utilization that really means we need hydrogen in an HGV. At the opposite end of the scale, the only mature market for hydrogen mobility today is in materials handling. Over 30% of food in American warehouses is apparently now moved by hydrogen, forklifts and pallet carriers. And you can see that pallet carrier, bottom right, one man with a joystick moving one pallet. It's not a big device, so clearly size isn't the issue. It's again utilization and uptime. And this applies across the board, independently of size or weight, including, of course, cars in the middle. Critically, it's about range and uptime. There's a role for both in all these sectors, but size and weight is erroneously seen as being the driver in that choice. It's also all too easy to conclude that battery electric vehicles in the car space are one. But I think this is quite easy to explain. We've had battery electric vehicles for as long as we've had petrol cars. That car, top left, broke the land speed record in 1899. It was the first car to do 100 kilometers an hour. And that was a battery electric vehicle. Now, we've, of course, got much better batteries. But there's no rocket science to make a battery electric vehicle. And conversely, fuel cell technology is entirely new. Until this came along, the only users of fuel cells were NASA for the command capsule in space, where they only needed about 1 kilowatt, and they couldn't give a monkeys what the price was. That is from Mercedes Museum website, complete with the typos. And as you can see from that van, there's an awful lot of kit in filling up the back of the van. And it's taken a lot of work to get all that technology under the bonnet of a car at the price that customers can afford, with the reliability that we've all come to expect. And quite honestly, even though we've known this for 30 years, The industry has been far too focused on the bottom line and the quarterly returns to invest in technology that they knew they'd need in 25 years' time, apart from the Japanese and Koreans. But by and large, the European and American manufacturers are not yet ready to make hydrogen vehicles because they haven't developed the technology. Now, fuel cell vehicles do have a critical role to play in the transport mix, as I said, but we also argue that it's almost as important to see a change in business model. Now, this is a generic diagram that we all face. Every company, every country is facing this converging funnel of constraints. In a growing population with increasing affluence and greater technological ability to rape the planet, we are in this, in this converging funnel where the constraints we now face, principally carbon and peak resource issues of all sorts, are absolutely new. They weren't on the radar when the business model of the industry was developed in the last century. And it's those environmental constraints, but also the regulatory pressure in response. And traditional businesses are bumping along the walls of the funnel, and it's painful and expensive to stay within those constraints. But it's not surprising because the profit motive lies outside the funnel. If you sell cars, you make more money by selling more cars. So you're rewarded for maximizing resource consumption. And I don't see how we can ever have a sustainable industrial system based on rewarding industry for the opposite of what we're trying to achieve. There is now such a massive responsibility on all of us. More floods, this time in Italy. And we're going to exceed 1.5 degrees this decade without any question. When the next migration crisis hits us due to floods, displacing communities all wanting to come here, only we can be to blame, and any rhetoric of stopping the boats really won't cut the mustard. However, although climate change is clearly the most pressing and urgent issue, it is not the only issue. And I believe that if we pursue net zero to the exclusion of all else, it'll be a completely Pyrrhic victory. There are issues like air quality, microplastics, critical materials. A renewable world is much more dependent on critical materials than the fossil-based world. In the fossil-based world, we can pretty much muddle through with steel and aluminium. But in the renewable world, everything north of copper in rarity, lithium, nickel, cobalt, neodymium, dysprosium, yttrium. There's a long list of pretty obscure materials. And it's not just cars that need it. It's wind turbines, it's solar PV. And we really need to find better ways of allocating those critical materials carefully and wisely. Sorry, I didn't say Riversimple is really trying to pioneer a new business model to make sustainability profitable. We think that is the key issue we need to face in order to align the interests of industry and manufacturers with the needs and outcomes that society seeks, turning all the costs of sustainability into sources of competitive advantage. And that means that the more sustainable you are, the more profitable you are. This is an example of a critical materials issue. This is a photograph. These areas of evaporation ponds are visible on a nation-level map of Chile in Google. Each of those patches is about 30 square miles. And it takes 26 tons of water to refine 12 kilos of lithium, which is what you need in a long-range battery electric vehicle. So it's one of the many issues we've really got to face in taking a whole system approach to these issues. But it's all about aligning interests in our business models. And to show just how misaligned they are, these are two cars made by the same company 70 years apart. Car on the left did 38 mpg. Car on the right did 38.6 mpg. Now, I think one might reasonably expect a little bit more progress than that, especially when you consider that in 1973 was the oil crisis. But we argue that, sadly, if you sell cars, there's no incentive to improve efficiency. In fact, there's a negative incentive. And that is because it does cost more to make a more efficient car, but customers will never pay you more for a more efficient car. Consequently, it just reduces the margin, and therein lies the negative incentive. If efficiency were profitable, I believe we'd have a rash of cars out there doing 100 mpg tomorrow. It's entirely technically possible, but we need to give a reason for industry to pursue it. Now, we need to align interests, as I say, and this means a change in business model. Industry will comply with regulations, usually, but it really won't go beyond them. We need to give industry a reason to excel on the outcomes that we seek. You don't need, if we make sustainability profitable, you don't need regulations. You don't need to regulate businesses to make more profit, because they're quite keen on doing that anyway. In the conventional business model, this is, PwC do an annual report, and they put a figure at 33% of the revenue generated by a car in its life going to the manufacturer. The other 60% plus goes elsewhere. If, on the other hand, you sell the vehicle as a service, this is what you see. And when I say vehicle as a service, it's not a lease or a rental. Taking a circular economy model seriously and really getting the maximum value out of it, there are two critical things and not much talked about. First is the car should stay on the same balance sheet from a clean sheet of paper when you're designing it right through to end of life. And secondly, all the operating costs should be internalised on that same P&L. And if you do that, you will build an entirely different car. It means that our interests are aligned. If you sell cars, your interests are obsolescence and high running costs. In our case, our interests are longevity and low running costs. But critically, the pricing to the customer is not driven by the build cost of the car. It's driven by the lifetime cost. Now, that does include the build cost, but it includes all the operating costs and end of life. Now, if we know it's going to be ours at end of life, we design for maximum recovery of value. That's not just raw materials, but components that can be refurbished and used again. We design it to maximize the length of the operating revenue stream, because we're receiving all of it, and minimize the operating costs, because we're paying them. And those three things, lower operating costs, longer revenue stream, end-of-life value recovery, can all offset a higher build cost in delivering a lower cost of ownership, even though it's a much more expensive vehicle to make. Sadly, if you sell vehicles, this is what you see, a supply chain cost curve. To match the price of petrol engine cars, you've got to get the volume up to get the cost down. To get the volume up, to get the cost down, you've got to get the volume up. So that's a real chicken and egg. If, on the other hand, you sell the service, you can come to market at the same cost of ownership without any premium long before it's as cheap for us to build. And that deals with the huge economic barrier that all zero carbon technologies face in coming to market. Finally, these are our cars. We've had these cars in trials in Milford Haven the last year with the Milford Haven Port Authority and Pembrokeshire County Council, and now they're in beta tests with retail customers. We believe it's the most sophisticated, not the most mature, but definitely the most sophisticated fuel cell powertrain in the world. The technology is ready. And it's not dependent on the critical materials that we don't have. Fuel cells vehicles will eventually be cheaper than combustion engine vehicles for long-range applications. Toyota have always actually said that fuel cells are going to be cheaper to make than combustion engines. And it also depends not on the critical materials, but on innovation. And we're really strong on innovation. It's also an immature sector in which, unlike the battery vehicle industry, which is really quite a mature industry now, and we've really missed that boat. It's much easier to build a position of global significance in an emerging sector than it is in a mature sector. And it plays to our strength. It also addresses the issues that the auto industry is facing at the moment with local content rules in order to retain tariff-free access to the European market. Because in vehicles like this, we can easily demonstrate a 55% local content. I think maybe in 10 years' time we'll feel lucky that we haven't been so successful in capturing a large share of BEV production and the supply chain. And we'll be sitting proud having captured a significant share of this market. Finally, I'd just like to say that we want people to take these cars because they want them, not through any eco-guilt. And our experience to date with customers is endorsing this. Routinely, we hear that this is what I've been waiting for. A battery car will never work for me. They offer all the flexibility and spontaneity of petrol cars. There's no behaviour change required, and they're also great fun to drive. And we're from a motorsport background, and we weren't going to build a boring car. So thank you very much indeed. Any questions I'm delighted to take if we've got time.